Andres pedaled his rusty bicycle through the crowded streets of Manila, weaving between buses, cars, and endless streams of people. The humid air pressed heavily on him, and the sweat on his brow mixed with the dust of the city, but he didn't slow down. His shirt was thin and faded, his shoes nearly worn through, yet there was something in the way he gripped the handlebars, an unspoken strength that kept him moving forward. Every delivery meant a few extra pesos, and every peso meant another meal for his younger siblings waiting at home. Life had not been kind to Andres. Just a year earlier, he had lost both his parents, leaving him with a burden far too heavy for someone his age. Still, he refused to give in to despair. At only 16, he had become both brother and father, doing whatever work he could find to keep his small family together. While other teenagers spent their afternoons in school or laughing with friends, Andres spent his days racing against time, delivering packages under the scorching sun or the pouring rain. Yet, despite the weight he carried, there was no bitterness in his eyes. Instead, there was a quiet determination, a fire that refused to burn out. He never complained, never asked for help. All he wanted was to see his siblings smile, to know they could eat dinner without worrying about tomorrow. And so, with each push of the pedal, Andres pressed on, chasing hope through the chaos of the city. The rain began to fall suddenly, heavy drops tapping against Andres's back as he rode along the narrow streets. He pulled over, searching for shelter, but that's when he noticed her, an old woman huddled on the sidewalk, her thin body trembling as the downpour drenched her belongings. A small bundle of clothes and a plastic bag of food lay beside her, now soaked through. People passed quickly, umbrellas raised, eyes averted, too busy to stop. Andres hesitated for a moment. His own clothes were already clinging to his skin, and the small packet of rice in his bag was supposed to be his only dinner that night. But something in the woman's eyes caught him, the same helplessness he had once seen in his siblings when they were hungry. Without a second thought, he parked his bicycle and walked over. He slipped off his only jacket, thin and frayed, and carefully draped it over her shoulders. The old woman looked up at him in surprise, her lips trembling as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Andres smiled gently, kneeling down as he opened his bag. He pulled out the food, handing it to her as though it was the most natural thing in the world. The rain pounded harder, and soon he was soaked to the skin. Still, he held his umbrella above her, shielding her from the storm while letting the water stream down his own face. For Andres, her comfort mattered more than his own hunger or exhaustion. Unbeknownst to Andres, a young passerby across the street had been watching the entire scene unfold. With a phone in hand, the stranger quietly pressed record, capturing the drenched delivery boy kneeling beside the old woman, his umbrella tilted protectively over her frail body. The camera caught every detail, the jacket hanging loosely on her shoulders, the way Andres gently pushed the food into her hands, and the soft, reassuring smile on his tired face. The moment was raw and unpolished, yet profoundly moving. The boy didn't know he was being filmed, there was no performance, no expectation of praise. He simply did what felt right, offering what little he had with sincerity. The stranger, moved by what they witnessed, decided to share the video online with a simple caption, "This is true kindness." Within hours, the clip began to spread. First among local community pages, then across the Philippines, and soon, beyond its borders. Viewers were struck not just by the act itself, but by the purity of it, an exhausted teenager, who had so little, still choosing to give. Comments poured in, people wrote about tears streaming down their faces, about how the world needed more hearts like Andres's. The video struck a nerve in a society often weighed down by its struggles, reminding everyone that humanity's greatest strength lay in compassion. By the time Andres returned home that night, tired and hungry, he had no idea his quiet moment of generosity had already begun to touch millions. The next morning, as Andres prepared for another long day of deliveries, his small home buzzed with unexpected visitors. Neighbors came knocking, holding bags of food and clothes. At first, he didn't understand, until one of them showed him the video on their phone. His heart stopped. There he was, drenched in the rain, shielding the old woman with his umbrella, giving away the food he desperately needed. The clip had already been viewed hundreds of thousands of times, with comments calling him a hero. By the afternoon, reporters arrived, followed by community leaders who wanted to help. A local charity announced they were raising funds for him and his siblings. Strangers, people Andres had never met, were donating money, offering scholarships, and even sending a brand new bicycle to replace his rusty old one. For the first time, his family's tiny home was filled with enough food to last weeks. His siblings, wide-eyed and smiling, clung to him, unable to believe their lives were changing overnight. Andres, overwhelmed, could hardly process it. Just a day ago, he had been worried about whether there would be enough rice for dinner. Now, people from all over the country, and even abroad, were reaching out, inspired by a single moment of kindness. The same boy who once carried the weight of survival on his own shoulders suddenly realized he wasn't as alone as he thought. His quiet act of compassion had opened the hearts of thousands, and their generosity was now lifting him in return. Weeks later, life looked different for Andres. His siblings no longer went to bed hungry, and the fear of tomorrow slowly gave way to hope. But what touched him most wasn't the donations or the gifts, it was the letters and messages pouring in from strangers across the world. People wrote about how his act reminded them to care for others, how it pushed them to help someone in need, even in small ways. Teachers showed the video in classrooms, parents shared it with their children, and communities used it as a reminder that kindness could spark real change. One evening, as the sun set over Manila, Andres sat outside his home with his younger brother and sister by his side. He thought about the old woman, about the rain, about how he never intended for anyone to notice what he did. All he had wanted was to make someone's burden lighter, if only for a moment. Looking at his siblings' smiling faces, he finally understood something profound, that kindness never ends with the person who gives it. It flows outward, multiplying, touching lives in ways we cannot see. With quiet emotion, Andres whispered to himself, even the smallest kindness can change the world. His words, simple yet true, carried the heart of the story that had touched an entire nation. And though he remained the same humble boy on a bicycle, his journey had proven that compassion, no matter how small, holds the power to heal, to inspire, and to unite humanity.